Hi, it's Luke here, back at Brighton Warlords with the Warhammer 40k Southern Heat for the GT. As you can see, everyone behind me is getting ready for round 4. Hopefully everyone's not too hungover, so stay tuned for lots more 40k coverage. I'm here with Mike now, and he's going to talk about his Necron army. It's got all the flyers that you expect to see now at the bigger tournaments, and yeah, just going to get you to sort of talk about what you've got in the list and why you've chosen the units you have.
The list is, I've got 4 Night Sives, got 4 Doom Sives, 3 Doom Sives, sorry, 5 Death Marks, 4 squads of 5 Warriors, 2 Necron Overlords with War Sives, usual setup. Have 2 Royal Courts as well. Royal Courts consist of Veil of Darkness with an Abyssal Staff, 4 Voltaic Staffs, and a Solar Pulse with Eldritch Lance. I've got a defence line with Comms Relay, which helps flyers turn up, turn 2, all at the same time. That's the list.
So it certainly seems all about the flyers. What's the sort of reason for so many of them in this list?
They're virtually impossible to hit unless you have Skyfire. So I can run around the board doing whatever I want freely.
So bearing in mind you've got all these flyers, what are your good and bad matchups? What sort of things are you really not wanting to see sitting across from you today?
The 2 lists I don't like playing are Guard with the new Hydra platforms from the Aeronautica book. And I'm playing a list first today, which is against Matt Randall, and he's got 4 Mortis Paladins Contemptors, which are a beast to kill flyers with.
They've got is that the ones with the Interceptor and Skyfire rules as well? Yeah.
I'm going to struggle against that today.
The Death Marks, I haven't always seen those in everyone's list constructions. What are they sort of there to do?
Death Marks are anti-terminator basically, because I stick the 2 Abyssal Staffs with them. Before the game begins, Death Marks select a prey unit, which will be something with a 2-up save, and the Abyssal Stars are AP1 Flamers, which will wound on a 2+, takes away Terminators, just like that. So that's the only thing I struggle against really.
Being an avid tournament player, how far do you think WYSIWYG and painting scores should affect a tournament score at the end of it? So do you think they're a good thing to include in the overall tournament scores, or do you think they're a bad thing, or do you think there should be some sort of balance? Where do you sort of stand on that?
Everyone knows I'm a lazy. I do the minimum possible, but if the minimum possible was detailed and everything, I'd do that as well. It's down to whoever's running the tournament, and I'll do the minimum possible to get the top scores, and that's me.
Brilliant, thanks for talking to us, Mike. Cheers, and good luck in the rest of the tournament.
Me and Alan had a look at the armies that we thought were going to be in the best army category. So the 5 people are, it's Ben Howden with Crimson Fist, James Clark is Space Marines, John Jasinski is Necrons, Richard Fielder, Andrew Bampton. And obviously you 5 have now qualified. Hurrah! Well done. Woo! So it doesn't matter if you lose. So anyway, so we'll start the timer now, and you have 2,500. Let's go with it.
Are you hungover this morning?
Yes.
Incredibly.
This is not random at all, is it? I'm dying.
Very.
Yes. Absolutely not.
I'm here now with the other event organiser for this heat of the GT, Alan Elsor. As I mentioned earlier, Pete is on the committee, as are you, for the GT, is that right?
Correct. Yes, I'm one of 5. So we're based largely around the country. So Pete's based down south in Brighton, I'm in the Midlands, then Rob and Paul are up in Preston, and Matt is in Warrington. So they're quite in northwest.
So is this quite an intentional thing that sort of happened, the spread of locations with all the members, or is that an accidental sort of thing?
It's deliberate. One of the things that we've noticed sort of within the tournament community is there's a bit of a north-south divide, in that people from the Midlands and the north don't really come down to Brighton, and by the same token there's very few people from Brighton go up to the Midlands and rarely go up to the northwest. So it's kind of we're trying to breach that division by holding heats in each of the regions to get as many people included in the hobby as we can.
Oh, that's excellent. And the structure of the GT and what you guys do, how does that all sort of work? Because obviously this committee hasn't just sort of sprung up, it's obviously taken a fair amount of work to kind of get everyone together. So talk a bit more about that and how you sort of go about making decisions for the GTs and putting things into place.
Well, the GT as it is came about 2 years ago, The first one was 2 years ago when Games Workshop stopped running their flagship tournament, which was the Games Workshop GT. And that, for many people, was the highlight of the tournament season. So you'd have this frantic period in October and November where there'd be a tournament on pretty much weekend, one for Fantasy, one for 40k, and then you'd have a bit of a quiet lull, and then you'd have the finals in February and March. When Games Workshop stopped supporting that sort of format to go to their more hobbyist events every quarter, it left a bit of a hole, and Neil Kerr, I think, was originally stepped into the plate and said we would need a flagship 40k tournament to replace the GT. Which is what he set up. So for the last 2 years, we've effectively had a single tournament held in March around the same time as the old final. Neil was organising it initially, but he had to step back because of university concerns, and he's moved to Sweden. Then it was taken over by the 40k podcast crew for a year. Unfortunately, their life commitments have got in the way of organising it, and so the 5 of us came together at a tournament, talking about the fact that if nobody stepped up to take on the GT, it could die and disappear, and that would be a really bad thing in our opinion for the hobby. And one of the other things that we wanted to do was get back to the old GT system where you had the heats towards the end of the year and then the final early the following year. So that's pretty much how it all evolved. Is the committee was 5 of us prepared to put in the work, and one of the things we've committed to is to stick with this for 3 years at least, so that there's continuity in the way the decisions are made, the way the events are run, and hopefully that we can learn from the lessons from one year to another and build on those things.
Oh, so any decisions that have been made in the composition of the tournament today and all the other heats, they're not going to change for the next 3 years? Is that what you said?
No, we'll obviously evolve if things don't work, but the way that we are at the moment with the heat system and the final system is something that we think defined the GT, and that's what we'll be keeping. The other things that really defined it was because it was originally a core Games Workshop tournament, we're trying to stick to the Games Workshop rules as much as possible. A lot of tournament organisers dislike certain portions of the rules and change it, make up their own missions and things like that, say things don't work. I mean, we might go down that way as the game evolves when we discover that there really are things that don't work, but as far as we can, we're trying to keep to the core principles of the rules.
With regards to that then, is there anything that you can think of that might be changed in the future? So banning of special characters, for example, or banning of certain mission types, or a restriction on unit compositions. Is there anything that you're that's in the back of your minds, as whether it's just you as an individual or the committee as a whole, that people are aware of as a problem that might be emerging?
So far as banning things, I don't personally like banning anything. If it's in the rules and it's been properly play tested, it should be okay. Unfortunately, it's Games Workshop and they have different power levels from codex to codex depending on when they were written. Also, there's things like we've included this year Forge World, which is the first time in a major tournament that Forge World has been allowed. I mean, we've put a few restrictions on there, so there's got to be the 40k stamp and in a published book. But that's just to hopefully get some level of playtesting from the games developers at Forge World and Games Workshop. But that, admittedly, is a bit light. So that's where we are at the moment. In terms of banning things, the only things that we may look at not allowing is Forge World, depending on how the community reacts to it and the feedback we get from this. Unfortunately, because we're just in the middle of a rules change, or we've just had a rules change, it's introduced a lot of things like flyers that certain armies don't have any counters to. And because Forge World is much more fluid in the way that it produces rules and models, they allow people to take stuff to counter those things, so it stops the game being dominated by certain types of lists to an extent. So far as banning special characters go, there was a lot of talk about that initially within 5th edition and things, but as Games Workshop released more and more codexes, the special characters become an integral part of those lists and allow some differences in flavour. And ultimately, it's more about choice and variety. We don't want a lot of same lists occurring and things like that, because I mean, towards the end of 5th Ed, there were a lot of net lists, so if you went and saw a Grey Knight army, you could guarantee it'd have at least 4 Razorbacks, 3 Dreadnoughts, some Purifiers. That's just the way it went. So by allowing more options, we hopefully will reduce the net list effect.
No, that makes sense, and I think variety is good to avoid those sorts of things, because no one wants to go to a tournament and play the same army 3 or 4 times in a day necessarily. So obviously, as we mentioned, there's a committee, so it's not just you that makes all the decisions or Pete that will make all the decisions. It's sort of a team sort of effort. So how much involvement do you have personally, and are there any sort of windows for people that might be interested in getting involved? Is there anything like that?
At the moment, we're organising it pretty much on a year-by-year basis. So this year we got together, we laid out informally a charter of how we want the events to run, what things we want to include. We all sat down. If anyone had a particularly strong opinion, they voiced it. I mean, I was very keen on the Forge World things. I think, but only the published things. Pete was very keen on just allowing all the Forge World in. Some people were less keen on having any Forge World, and we kind of compromised. So when we're all at a tournament together, or there's a significant number, we'll sit down, we'll have a chat about it, make sure. But we also communicate on our own section of a forum. So if we've got any concerns or anything like that, we'll put it on. One of the main things that we do is we'll discuss things in the background, but any official communications about the GT come from one account that we've all got rights to. But before we post anything, we all check and make sure that we're okay to do this and that we all agree. And if we do have any disagreements, it's put to a vote. So far as opening up the organisation to new members, if anyone is interested, then they can contact us, say why they are, if they're prepared to make the commitment. That's great. I mean, as we look to the future and expanding the GT, I mean, I'd quite like to include more heats, maybe have one down in Wales, possibly one even in Scotland, because on the UK circuit, I rarely see any people from Scotland, although we do have a Scottish ETC team. Yeah. They're mostly English people who have got some sort of Scottish heritage, rather than people who actually live in, say, Inverness or Stirling. And I know that there's a tournament that runs in Stirling yearly that I've never been able to get to. It's always fallen at the wrong time. But one day I'm going to make that pilgrimage. Yeah.
Okay, and if anyone is interested in looking at the stuff that you're sort of posting, where can they find the information about the GTs? Where's the sort of main outlet for that?
Our main portal for informing the community is on the Warhammer forum. Okay. So on there we've got a 40k GT user account, and we'll post all the updates then. Then in the run-up to events, we'll post what we've put on the Warhammer forum onto other forums, so that people who maybe don't go on there can be updated. So that's the main portal, and within there there's contact details for us, so if you want to send us an email or a PM, they're in those posts.
Lastly then, what advice would you have to anyone who's either part of a club or wants to start up a club and run their own events? Not necessarily on the same sort of scale as the GT and the heats, but yeah, someone that's thinking about doing their own event but not sure how to go about it.
That's quite a good question. There's no magic to running an event, I don't think, so long as you can publicise it and get people to come. There aren't really any barriers. Obviously, you need to have a good grasp of the rule system so that you know what to include. There's some quite interesting rules questions that come up when you're running it, so if you haven't got a good handle on it, then you can come a cropper. If you're going to run something and you're going to have a rules pack, just make sure that you read it through several times to make sure that there's no holes in there or glaring omissions or things like that, because there's nothing worse if someone comes to your event with their list and you go, actually, no, you can't have that here, but they go, your rules pack says this and this here, and they go, oh no, but we meant this. That's a bit of a bad sign. So I think the key to anything is just in the preparation and making sure that you spend the effort to make sure that everything's as right and prepared as you can before you turn up to the event. I mean, and that can be as simple as just making sure that you've got all the technology in place that you want to use for your event. So if you've got a lot of players, then you'll need a computer to do the results. Make sure that the software you're using is actually fit for purpose before you come to the event, and make sure that you've got a backup plan just in case something goes wrong with the technology, so that you can run smoothly. And I think the other important thing is to acknowledge that no one's perfect and people will make mistakes in the run-up and the running, but you just got to be receptive to the fact that you can make a mistake and rectify it, because ultimately you're providing a service for players and you want them to have a good time, and that's ultimately what it's about, is people having a good time.
Another question I asked Pete actually was about cheating, and sort of like to ask you how you sort of approach a situation that looks like it's going to sort of turn into something a bit unpleasant in that regard, and how you sort of deal with people and resolve any issues that come up.
So far, within the UK circuit for the last few years, we've been pretty lucky in that people have become more relaxed. There's less arguments and things occurring, because I think as technology has improved and people have got to know each other better, we've become more of a community of friends. I mean, in the past, I remember going to the old GTs, which were amazing events in and of themselves, but I didn't really know anybody and nobody knew me, and people went in clubs and the small subsets. But with the advent of forums and communication, now I'm like quite good friends with Liam, who's just over there in the background, even though we live 150 miles away and we've only played maybe 3 times, because we talk on the forums and things like that and have varying viewpoints, and we've got to know each other's personalities. That helps quite a lot. In terms of dealing difficult players, it all depends on the circumstances. I think there's very few people in the community that deliberately cheat, and those that do deliberately cheat, because of the advent of technology now, it will get around to the rest of the community. So that's quite a good stick, if you will, to keep people in line, possibly a bit heavy, but make sure people are well behaved, because if you get a reputation as a cheat, then nobody's going to want to play against you. But when they do play against you, people are going to be watching, so you won't get those opportunities to cheat. Yeah. And also, at the end of the day, it's a game, and if you cheat it, all you're robbing is yourself.
Thanks for helping out today at the local club, and thanks for your time, and we'll catch up a bit later on lunchtime for the ETC chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay, it's the end of round 4, or nearing the end of round 4 now, and I'm here with Robert to talk about his Necron army. He's gone 4-0 now, and going to have a little chat with him, because he should be on the top tables for the next game with another Necron opponent. So it's an interesting take now to see 2 slightly different Necron armies, because they're not just carbon copies of one another. So we're going to sort of have a little chat with Robert now, and get you to sort of talk about what you've got in your list, and maybe a few reasons why on some of the sort of more unusual elements.
Okay, the list is, there's a Necron Lord, Overlord on a barge with a 2-up save, a War Scythe and Mind Shackle Scarabs, and he was pretty standard in the last edition as well. But he unlocks a court, so you can take Cryptex, which become more important in the rest of the list. Then the second HQ is a Destroyer Lord, with a 2-up save, a War Scythe and Mind Shackle Scarabs, and he was less regular in 5th. But now with the new wound allocations and shooting, he can join a unit, sit at the front and take 2-up saves. So it helps the unit, and he joins a unit of Wraiths. Then there's 3 Cryptex, and they're all Harbingers of the Storm. So they've got a 12-inch Haywire gun. So it shoots 4 shots, hitting on 3s, 2 up to glance, 6 is penetrate. And they each go with a unit of 5 warriors in a Night Scythe. So the Night Scythes can come on 24 and bail them out, and they can tap any tank they want. Then there's one other Cryptek with a Veil of Darkness and Nightmare Shroud. And he joins the unit of 10 Immortals, so they can teleport around. Then the fast attacks, 2 units of 5 Wraiths, just naked, basic Wraiths, but really effective. There's 3 Scarabs, because I had some points left over, and they can be useful sometimes. And the last thing is 3 Annihilation Barges, with Teslas underneath as well, so they just pump out ridiculous amounts of firepower.
Are they working out for you?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing with them, the Night Scythes have them as well. They reroll to hit, so it's 3s rerolling, every 6 generates another 2 hits. And the best thing with the Annihilation Barges is with the new rules, they can move 12 and Snapfire. So when you're shooting other flyers, you just move 12, Snapfire the Annihilation Barges, 6s to hit, but each 6 generates another 2, so each 6 is a 3 hits, and then you reroll misses. So they're really effective against flyers as well.
A lot of people, they sort of poo-poo the Necrons, and it's boring. They're all the same. Don't have to think about it. They're just good, and all the rest of it. Or is it actually a bit of a job to sort of work with the army?
No, yeah, it's definitely a job to work with the army. There's little things like the Destroyer Lord within the Wraiths, for instance. You have to be careful where to position it, because otherwise people are moving and just shoot the Wraiths, and then the 2-up save's not going to apply to the unit. And the other major issue is the range. The Tesla, although they've got a destructive ability, they're only 24-inch range, so they're quite limited, and you have to be careful sometimes. As for the armies all being the same, there's a lot of variation. Like the armies here today, they're all similar in the sense you've got annihilation barges and maybe a couple of scythes. But other than that, they seem to be a lot different. Like one guy's got a Catan, another guy's got 2 units of Veil Immortals, another guy's got 5 Night Scythes. So it varies between the lists.
I think that's a good thing about what is essentially a tier 1 army being so varied, because it doesn't help perceptions of the army if they're all the same. So do you think it's a good thing that it's so varied, or?
No, definitely. It's like I was looking at some of the other Necron armies. I think mine's the only one with the Storm Cryptex. But other people have used it, like some people haven't took a Lord on Command Barge. But you need that to unlock the Cryptex. So it goes hand in hand.
Thanks very much for that. I'll let you get on and sort yourself out for the next round, and good luck. I know you're playing another Necron army in the next round, so we'll catch up with you at the end of that and see how that goes.
Okay, thank you.
Cheers. Here now, just about to start round 5, as I say, on table 1, and it's Necrons v Necrons in a minute. We're going to chat now with Simon and get a little sneak peek of what he's bringing to the table.
Okay, well, with this army, I tried to be slightly different and not go for the carbon copy Necron army. I put in a Necron Lord, it's fairly standard. He's kitted out to be quite combat orientated and to walk along with a unit of Lich Guard. To support them, combat wise, I put in 2 units of Wraiths. They're fairly standard in most armies now because they're quite good. 2 units of 6, each with 2 Whip Coils, just so you can tie up the occasional character, slow them down a bit so you can get the hits on them first. To round off the combat loadout, I've put in a Satan. Again, you don't tend to see Satan, and in the previous edition, when you have a lot of Dark Eldar armies around with poison, they were a no-go because they died in seconds. But in the current edition, because you now need 25% to get cover saves, and because you can hide a bit more easily now, and because there isn't so much poison around, it adds that little something extra. And you end up with 4 combat units then in this army that your opponent has to focus on. And the idea is that they can't kill them all before I get to them. And one of them, or maybe 2 of them, will get to their opponent's army and do a lot of damage. Especially as most tend to be shooting armies, so aren't as good in close combat. Supporting this then, we've got the standard 3 Annihilation Barges. They're pretty standard in every army, put out a lot of shots, and can take out infantry and armour. I then had 2 Night Scythes in the army. They each come with 5 Necron Warriors, just for some obligatory troops choices. Last turn sort of objective grabbing or line breaker. I don't really like flyers in Sick Dead. I'm not a huge fan. And so the only reason I've got Night Scythes in is to give me some sort of anti-air. And they're not fantastic at it, but they're all right, and they can still do the anti-infantry and the anti-tank on the ground. It's the final choice. I just put in 8 Immortals. They've got Tesla, and they just provide a bit of sort of midfield support.
Going into the 5th round, you've won all your games so far. Is it a bit of a one-trick pony sort of thing, or are you finding that you have to employ sort of different tactics to get the victories in each sort of game?
You certainly have to apply different tactics, but the overall one is that it's a novel Necron army compared to a lot of them. It doesn't have as much shooting, and most people, when they see a Necron army on the table, are set up to deal with a lot of shooting, and so they plan accordingly. And so when I turn up with some shooting, in a fair amount but not a huge amount, supported by the combat units which are running at them, it makes them think and makes them panic, and it's something they're not used to seeing. And so it is a one-trick pony per se. Once they've played it once, they'll know how to deal with it slightly more better next time. But obviously in a tournament, you only play each player as a general rule once. So one-trick pony is fine, because you only need to play it once for each person.
Lastly, obviously you said you got the Satan Shard, but what sort of are his limitations and what is he good for?
Well, the Satan is really there as the 4th combat unit to act as a bit of a bullet magnet. It's got relatively high strength and toughness at 7, 4 wounds and a 4+ invulnerable save. It's got Gaze of Death, which allows it to deal out more damage in combat. It means it can take on larger units and mobs, and it also gives the ability to heal itself. It's quite fast combat. You're not slowed down by terrain, obstacles. And he then runs every turn, And if you assume an average of a 3 or 4 inch run, he can get sort of 9 or 10 inches across the board every turn. So within sort of second turn, he can potentially charge, maybe, and at least the 3rd turn, he's in there. And he's another wave. So as your opponent is dealing with the Wraiths, which are the first wave, they've then got this Satan coming hot on the heels.
Well, I shall leave you with that now. Thank you for chatting with us, and good luck with the rest of the tournament. Cheers. Are Necrons overpowered?
I would say yes, because the Codex seems to be written for 6th edition.
I would say it depends. For example, there was somebody here using the 6 flyer list. If someone takes an army that can wipe them off in 2 turns, then what are they going to do? I appreciate they can go to ground and so on, but if you can get to them in 2 turns and wipe them off the board, that's 6 flyers that have never been on the board. No.
There's only one word, and that's yes. No, not at all. Everyone can take them, and frankly, in close combat, they suck. So no one's got anything to be afraid of.
Yeah. In my opinion, they're probably the best 40k army at the moment.